The Odyssey of Homer, Book 3, Telemachus with Nestor. Leaving the waters of the splendid east, the sun leapt up into the brazen firmament to bring light to the immortals and to mortal men on the fruitful earth. The travellers now came to Pylos, the stately citadel of Neleus, where they found the people on the seashore sacrificing jet-black bulls to Poseidon, lord of the earthquake, god of the sable locks. There were 9 companies seated there, with 500 men in each, and every company had 9 bulls to sacrifice. They had just tasted the victim's entrails, and were burning the thigh bones in the god's honour, as the travellers brought their trim ship to land. The crew brailed up, and filled the sail, moored their vessel, and disembarked with Athena leading the way. Telemachus was the last to leave. The god with the flashing eyes turned to him now and said, "Telemachus, you must forget your diffidence. There is no occasion for it here at all. Why have you crossed the seas if not to find out where your father's bones lie buried and how he met his end? Go straight up, then, to Nestor, the tamer of horses. We are here to learn the wisdom hidden in his heart. But you yourself must appeal to him to tell you the honest truth, though a man as wise as he is will not lie." "But Mentor," the thoughtful Telemachus asked, "how am I to go up to him? How shall I greet him? I have had no practice in making speeches. It is embarrassing for a young man to question one so much his senior." "Telemachus," replied bright-eyed Athena, "where your own intelligence fails, a god will inspire you. For I think the gods have blessed both your birth and your progress to manhood." With this, Pallas Athena led off quickly, and Telemachus followed in the steps of the goddess, till they reached the place where the people of Pylos were assembled. There sat Nestor with his sons. Their followers around them were piercing meat with skewers, or roasting it in preparation for the banquet. But as soon as they caught sight of the strangers, they all made a move in their direction, took them by the hand, and invited them to join them. Nestor's son Pisistratus, who was the first to reach them, took them both by the hand and gave them places at the banquet on downy fleeces spread over the sandy beach, near his brother Thrasymedes and his father. Then he helped them to the victim's inner parts, filled a gold cup with wine, and welcomed Pallas Athena, daughter of Zeus, who bears the Aegis, with these words: "Pray to the god, my friend. This feast that you find us holding is in the Lord Poseidon's honour. When you have made your drink offering and your prayer as our rites dictate, pass on the cup of mellow wine to your companion here, so that he may do the same. For he too must be a worshipper of the immortal gods, of whom all men stand in need. But since he is the younger, in fact a man of my own age, I hand this golden beaker to you first." And he placed the cup of sweet wine in Athena's hands. The goddess was delighted at the good manners which the young man had shown in giving her the golden beaker first, and at once began an earnest prayer to the Lord Poseidon. "Hear me, Poseidon, sustainer of earth, and do not grudge us, your suppliants, the fulfillment of our wishes. First of all, grant glory to Nestor and his sons. Consider next these others, and recompense all in Pylos for their sumptuous offerings. Grant, lastly, that Telemachus and I may successfully accomplish the task that brings us here in our swift black ship, and afterwards reach home safely." So the goddess prayed, and as each petition lifted her lips, she herself made its fulfillment sure. Then she passed the fine 2-handled beaker to Telemachus, and Odysseus' son repeated her prayers. The outer flesh from the victims was now roasted and drawn off the spits. Portions were carved for all, and they began their sumptuous feast. When they had satisfied their appetite and thirst, Nestor, the Granean charioteer, said, "Now that our visitors have eaten well, it is the right moment to put some questions to them and inquire who they are. Who are you, friends? From what port have you sailed over the highways of the sea? Is yours a trading venture, or are you sailing the seas recklessly, like roving pirates who risk their lives to ruin other people?" Telemachus, inspired by Athena, who was anxious for him to question the king about his father's disappearance, and so win a good name among men, now plucked up the courage to make him a spirited reply. "Nestor, son of Neleus, great glory of the Greeks, you ask where we come from. I will tell you. We are from Ithaca, which lies at the foot of Mount Nion. We have come on private, not on public business. I am searching through the length and breadth of the land for news of my noble father, the long-suffering Odysseus, who, it is said, fought by your side years ago at the sack of Troy. We can account for all the others who took part in the war. We know where each man met his pitiful death. But Zeus has wrapped even the death of Odysseus in utter mystery, and no one can tell us for certain when he died, whether he was the victim of some hostile tribe on land, or whether he was lost at sea in Amphitrite's waves. So I have come here to plead with you in the hope that you will tell me the truth about my father's unhappy end, if by any chance you witnessed it yourself or heard the story from some wanderer like him. For if ever a man was born to suffer, it was he. Do not soften your account out of pity or concern for my feelings, but faithfully describe the scene that met your eyes. I beseech you, if ever my good father Odysseus in the hard years of war at Troy gave you his word and kept it, remember what he did and tell me all you know. Ah, my friend, exclaimed Nestor the Grecian charioteer, what memories the name of Troy brings back! The miseries we fierce Achaeans endured there, raid after raid across the misty seas in search of plunder wherever Achilles led, fight after fight around the very walls of royal Priam's town. There our best men fell, there warlike Ajax lies, there lies Achilles, there Patroclus, wise in counsel as the gods. There too Antilochus, my own dear son, as strong as he was handsome, a fast runner, and what a fighter too. Nor is that the full sum of what the noble Achaeans endured at Troy. There is no man on earth who could not unfold to you the whole disastrous tale, not though you sat and questioned him for 6 years, by which time you would have grown weary and gone home. For 9 years we struggled to bring them down by every stratagem we could devise, but Zeus made it very difficult for us to achieve victory, and all the time there was not a man that dared to match his wits against the admirable Odysseus, who in every kind of strategy proved himself supreme, your father, if you really are his son. Indeed, I cannot help looking at you in awe. You talk exactly as he did, and I should have sworn no young man could so resemble him in speech. In all those years, whether at the General Assembly or in the Council of the Kings, not once did Odysseus and I find ourselves speaking on opposite sides. We seemed to share a single mind. So well did we agree when, with our good sense and judgment, we advised the Argives on the best policies. After we had destroyed Priam's towering city, we left in our ships, but then the gods scattered the fleet. Zeus planned disaster for our homeward journey because we had not all behaved sensibly and honestly, and many came to grief through the fatal anger of the bright-eyed daughter of that mighty sire. It happened like this. She began by making the 2 sons of Atreus quarrel. Acting on the spur of the moment and with no regard for procedure, they summoned the whole Achaean army to assemble at sunset, so that the troops arrived drunk, and told them the reason for the assembly. Menelaus put it to them all that the first concern should be to get to their distant homes across the seas. But this was not at all to Agamemnon's liking. He was for keeping them there and making ceremonial offerings to Athena in the hope of appeasing her terrible wrath, not realizing in his folly how implacable she would prove, for it is not so easy to divert the immortal gods from their purpose. Well, the pair of them stood there exchanging hard words, till the soldiers, themselves divided in opinion, broke up the assembly in indescribable uproar. That night we rested, nursing vindictive feelings against our comrades in arms, for Zeus was making ready to strike us the fatal blow. In the morning, half of us ran our ships down into the tranquil sea and stowed in them our spoils and the captive women in their low-girdled dresses. Then, though the rest still held back and stayed where they were with Agamemnon, the commander-in-chief, our party embarked and set out. Our ship sailed fast, for a god had levelled the deep swell of the sea. We soon reached Tenedos, and there, eager to be home, we sacrificed to the gods. But Zeus had no intention of letting us reach home so soon, and he mercilessly stirred dissension among us once more. As a result, one squadron swung the curved prows of their vessels round and turned back towards Troy. These were the followers of Odysseus, that wise and subtle king, falling in once more with the wishes of Agamemnon, son of Atreus. But I, well aware of the gods' sinister designs, fled with the massed ships that formed my company. Warlike Diomedes did the same, bringing his party with him, and later on auburn-haired Menelaus followed too. He caught us up at Lesbos, where we were pondering over the long sea journey, whether to sail north of the rugged coast of Chios and by way of Syria, keeping the island on our left, or to sail south of Chios past the windy heights of Mimas. We prayed for a sign, and the god made it clear that we should cut straight across the open sea to Euboea to get out of harm's way as quickly as possible. A whistling wind blew up, and our ships made splendid running down the teeming seaways, reaching Geraestus during the night. And many a bull's thigh we laid on Poseidon's altar after spanning that weary stretch of water. It was on the 4th day that the company of Diomedes, son of Tydeus, the tamer of horses, brought their fine craft to anchor in Argos. But I held on for Pylos, and the breeze never dropped from the moment when the god made it blow. Consequently, dear child, I got back without any news of the men we had left behind, and I have no idea who escaped or who was lost. But all the news that has come to me as I sit here at home you shall have, as is only right, and I'll keep back nothing. In the first place, they tell me that the Myrmidon spearmen reached home in safety under the great Achilles' noble son, and that Poeas' son, the brilliant Philoctetes, fared equally well. Again, Idomeneus brought all his men to Crete, all, that is, who had survived the war. The sea got none from him. As for Agamemnon, though you live far away, you must have heard how he had no sooner got back than he fell a wretched victim to Aegisthus' plot. And a grim reckoning there was for Aegisthus, which shows what a good thing it is when a man dies for a son to survive him, as Orestes survived to take revenge on the treacherous Aegisthus, who had killed his noble father. So you, my friend, and what a tall and splendid young man you have become, be as brave as Orestes. Then future generations will sing your praises. The thoughtful Telemachus replied, King Nestor, son of Neleus, great glory of the Achaeans, that was revenge indeed. Orestes' fame will travel throughout the Achaean lands and live in song for generations. Ah, if the gods would only give me strength like his to exact revenge for the suitors' vicious crimes, their willful disregard of what is right, and the ways they have humiliated me. But they have no such happiness in store for me, nor for my father. I must just endure. My friend, said Nestor the Gerenian charioteer, now that your own remarks have put me in mind of it, they do say a whole crowd of your mother's suitors are wreaking havoc in your house as uninvited guests. Tell me, do you tamely submit to this, or have the people of Ithaca been listening to some rumour inspired by a god that has turned their hearts against you? Who knows whether some day Odysseus may not come back, alone perhaps, or with all his followers, and pay these suitors out for their violence. I only wish that bright-eyed Athena could show towards you some of the loving care she devoted to your illustrious father in the course of our hard campaigns at Troy. For never in my life have I seen the gods display such open affection as Pallas Athena showed in her championship of Odysseus. Ah, if only she would love and care for you like that, some of those gentlemen would soon have all thoughts of courtship knocked out of their heads forever. Venerable lord, said the thoughtful Telemachus, I see no hope whatsoever of your words proving true. You speak of the impossible. You amaze me. For all my hopes, that will never happen, even if the gods were to will it. Telemachus, the god of the flashing eyes, exclaimed, What are you saying? A god who wills it can bring anyone safely home, however far away he may be. And for myself, I would rather live through untold hardships to reach home in the end and see that happy day, than come straight back and die at my own hearth, as Agamemnon did by the wiles of his wife and Aegisthus. But it is our common lot to die, and the gods themselves cannot rescue even one they love, when death that stretches all men out lays its dread hand upon him. Mentor, the thoughtful Telemachus replied, let us not discuss these painful matters any more. We can no longer count on my father's return. The gods who never die have already set his feet on the dark path that leads to death. But there is something else I would like to ask Nestor, whose knowledge of men's ways and thoughts is unrivaled. They tell me he has been king through 3 generations, and when I look at him I seem to gaze on immortality itself. Nestor, son of Neleus, tell me what really happened. How did imperial Agamemnon, son of Atreus, meet his end? Where was Menelaus, and by what cunning snare did that treacherous Aegisthus contrive to kill a man far braver than himself? Was Menelaus away from Achaean Argos and wandering abroad? Is that why Aegisthus plucked up the courage to strike? My child, Nestor the Gerenian charioteer answered, I will tell you the whole story. You can imagine for yourself what would have happened had Agamemnon's brother, Aubenheer Menelaus, come back from Troy and caught Aegisthus in the house alive. No mound would have honoured his remains. Flung on the plain outside the city walls, he'd have made meat for the dogs and birds of prey, and there's no woman in Achaia who would have shed a tear for him. His was indeed no petty crime. While we who were besieging Troy toiled at heroic tasks, he spent his leisured days right in the heart of Argos, where the horses graze, busy charming Agamemnon's wife with his seductive talk. At first, Queen Clytemnestra turned a deaf ear to his dishonourable schemes. She was a sensible woman, and besides, she had a minstrel with her to whom Agamemnon, when he left for Troy, had given orders to watch over his queen. But when the fatal day came, appointed by the gods for her to yield, Aegisthus took this minstrel to a desert isle, left him there as carrion for the birds of prey, and carried Clytemnestra off to his own house, fond lover, willing lady. After this great achievement, he heaped the holy altars of the gods with thigh bones and hung the temple walls with fine fabrics and gold, thank offerings for a success beyond his wildest dreams. Meanwhile, we were sailing together over the sea from Troy, Menelaus and I, the best of friends. But when we were abreast of the sacred cape of Sunium, where Attica juts out into the sea, Phoebus Apollo shot one of his painless arrows at Menelaus's helmsman and killed him, with the tiller of the running ship still in his hands. This man, Phrontis, son of Onetor, had been the world's best steersman in a gale, and Menelaus, though anxious to journey on, was kept at Sunium till he could bury his comrade with the proper rites. But when he too had got away over the wine-dark sea in those great ships of his, and had run as far as the steep headland of Malea, far-seeing Zeus brought disaster on their journey, and sent them a howling gale with giant waves. Then and there he split the fleet in two. He drove one group towards Crete and the Cadonian settlements on the river Iadanos. Now, where the lands of Gortyn end, out in the misty sea, there is a precipitous cliff that falls abruptly to the water, and the southwesterly gales drive the great rollers against a headland to the west, in towards Phaestus, with nothing but this puny reef to keep their violence in check. When one party reached the spot, the crews by a hair's breadth escaped destruction, though their ships were splintered on the rocks by the fury of the seas. Meanwhile, Menelaus, with the remaining 5 vessels of his blue-prowed fleet, was driven on by wind and wave to Egypt. And so it was that he was cruising in those foreign lands, amassing a fortune in goods and gold, while Aegisthus schemed this wickedness at home. After he had killed Agamemnon, the usurper reigned in golden Mycenae and kept the people in subjection for 7 years. But the 8th brought him disaster in the shape of Orestes. For that brave youth returning from Athens killed Aegisthus, his noble father's murderer, and so the slayer was slain. When Orestes had done the deed, he invited his friends to a funeral banquet for his hateful mother and the cowardly Aegisthus, and on the self-same day he was joined by Menelaus at the loud war cry, bringing in all the treasures that had filled his holds. Be warned yourself, my friend. Don't stray too long or too far from home, nor leave your wealth unguarded with such a set of arrogant brutes in the place, unless you want them to share it out, to eat up all you have, so making your journey futile. I do urge you, however, to pay Menelaus a visit, for he is only just returned home from a region so remote that one might well give up all hope of return once the winds had blown one astray into that wide expanse of sea, which is so vast and perilous that even the birds cannot cross it in a year. So set off now with your ship and crew, or, if you prefer to go by land, I have a chariot and horses at your disposal, and my sons are at your service too, to escort you to lovely Lacedaemon, where auburn-haired Menelaus lives. Appeal to him in person if you want the truth from his lips, though as wise a man as he is will not lie. As Nestor came to an end, the sun went down and darkness fell. It was the bright-eyed goddess Athena who spoke next. Venerable lord, your tale was well told, but come, cut up the victims' tongues and mix the wine, so that we can pour out offerings to Poseidon and the other immortals before we think of sleeping. It is time for bed. Now that the light has faded into dusk, it is not right to remain any longer at this feast of the gods. We should return home. It was the daughter of Zeus who had spoken. Her words did not fall on deaf ears. The squires sprinkled their hands with water, while the young attendants filled the mixing bowls to the brim, and then, after pouring a few drops first in each man's cup, they served them all with wine. The tongues were thrown into the flames. The company rose and sprinkled libations on them. And when they had made their offerings and drunk their fill, Athena and Prince Telemachus both made a move to return to their hollow ship. But Nestor stopped them, protesting loudly. "May Zeus and the other immortal gods forbid that you should go to your ship and turn aside from my house as though it belonged to some destitute pauper who hasn't enough blankets and rugs for himself and his guests to sleep between in comfort. Indeed, I have good bedding for all, and I swear that the son of my friend Odysseus shall not lie down to sleep on his ship's deck so long as I am alive or sons survive me here to entertain all visitors that come to my door." "Well said, my lord," replied the goddess of the flashing eyes, "and it is right for Telemachus to accept your invitation. He will go with you now and sleep in your palace, while I return to the black ship to reassure the men and tell them everything, for I am the only senior in the party. All the rest are young men of much the same age as the great-hearted Telemachus, and follow him out of companionship. I intend to sleep there by the black ship's hull tonight, and in the morning to set out on a visit to the great-hearted Cauconians, who owe me a long-standing debt. Not a small one either. But since Telemachus has become your guest, send him on in a chariot with one of your sons, and give him the fastest and strongest horses in your stable." As she finished, bright-eyed Athena took the form of a vulture and flew off. They were all amazed. The old king marvelled at the sight. "Telemachus, dear boy," he exclaimed, seizing him by the hand, "there is no chance that you will ever be a coward or weakling when, young as you are, you already have your guardian gods at your side." For of all that live on Olympus, this was no other than the daughter of Zeus, the august lady of Triton, who honoured your noble father too among the Argives. "Goddess, be gracious, and grant fame to me and to my sons and to my honoured wife. In return, you shall have a yearling heifer, broad in the brow, whom no one yet has broken in and led beneath the yoke. She shall be sacrificed to you with gilded horns." That was his prayer, and Pallas Athena heard him, and now the Gerenian charioteer Nestor led the way towards his stately home, followed by his sons and his sons-in-law. When they came to the royal palace, they took their places on the seats and chairs, and the old man prepared a bowl of mellow wine for his guests, from a jar that had stood for 10 years, until the moment when the maid undid the cap and opened it. When the old king had mixed a bowl of this vintage, he poured a little out, with earnest prayers to Athena, daughter of Zeus, who holds the aegis. They made their libations and quenched their thirst, after which the rest went to their homes for the night. But Nestor, the Gerenian charioteer, arranged for the noble Odysseus' son Telemachus to sleep at the palace itself, on a wooden bedstead in the echoing portico, with the spearman Pisistratus, that leader of men, next to him. He was the only unmarried son left at home. The king himself retired to rest in his room at the back of the high building, where the queen his wife prepared his bed. When dawn came, fresh and rosy-fingered, Nestor, the Gerenian charioteer, got up from his bed, went out, and seated himself on a smooth white bench, which stood gleaming and polished in front of his lofty doors. Here his father Neleus used to sit and give counsel as wise as the gods, but he had long since died and gone to Hades' halls. So now Nestor of Gerenia sat there in his turn, sceptre in hand, a warden of the Achaean race. His sons all came from their rooms and gathered round him, Echephron and Stratius, Perseus and Aretus, and the noble Thrasymedes. The heroic Pisistratus came last and made the 6th. The godlike Telemachus was ushered to a seat at their side, and Nestor the Gerenian charioteer now made his wishes known. "Quick, my dear sons, do what I want, so that I can pay my devotions to Athena, who of all the gods has first claim upon them, since it was she who came in person to me at the gods' sumptuous banquet. One of you go to the meadow for a heifer to be brought here as quickly as the cowherd can drive her, and one go down to the great-hearted Telemachus' black ship, and bring all his crew here except 2. Another, summon the goldsmith Laerces to gild the heifer's horns. The rest of you stay with me here, and tell the servants indoors to prepare a feast in the palace, and to fetch seats and firewood and fresh water." They all busily set about their tasks. The heifer came from the meadows, bold Telemachus' crew came from his good ship, and the smith came equipped with the bronze tools of his trade, anvil, hammer, and the strong tongs he used for working gold. Athena also came to accept the sacrifice. Then Nestor the old charioteer gave out the gold, with which the smith gilded the heifer's horns by way of embellishment to please the goddess's eye. Next, Stratius and Echephron led the heifer forward by the horns. Aratus came from the storeroom carrying in his right hand a flowered bowl of lustral water, and in the other a basket with the barley meal. The stalwart Thrasymedes, gripping a sharp axe, stood by to strike the victim down, and Perseus held the dish to catch its blood. The old charioteer Nestor now started the ritual with the lustral water and the scattered grain, and offered up his earnest prayers to Athena as he began the sacrifice by throwing a tuft of hair from its head on the fire. When they had prayed and sprinkled the barley meal, Nestor's son, the high-spirited Thrasymedes, stepped up and struck. The axe cut through the tendons of the heifer's neck, and it collapsed. At this the women raised their celebratory cry, Nestor's daughters and his daughter-in-law, and his honoured wife Eurydice, Clymenus' eldest daughter. The men lifted the heifer's head from the trodden earth and held it up while that leader of men, Pisistratus, cut its throat. When the dark blood had gushed out and life had left the heifer's body, they swiftly dismembered the carcass, cut out the thigh bones in the usual way, wrapped them in folds of fat, and laid raw meat above them. The venerable king burnt these on the firewood, sprinkling red wine over the flames, while the young men gathered round with 5-pronged forks in their hands. When the thighs were burnt up, and they had tasted the inner parts, they carved the rest into small pieces, pierced them with skewers, and held the sharp ends to the fire till all was roasted. The beautiful Polycaste, King Nestor's youngest daughter, now bathed Telemachus. When she had bathed him and rubbed him with olive oil, she gave him a tunic and arranged a fine cloak round his shoulders, so that he stepped from the bath looking like an immortal god. He then went and sat down by Nestor, the shepherd of the people. When they had roasted the outer flesh and taken it off the skewers, they sat down to dine, with squires to wait on them and fill their golden cups with wine. After they had satisfied their appetite and thirst, Nestor the Gerenian charioteer said, "Now, my sons, fetch Telemachus a pair of long-maned horses and harness them to a chariot, so that he can be on his way." They obeyed him promptly, and soon had a pair of fast horses harnessed to a chariot, in which the housekeeper had packed bread and wine together with the delicacies of the kind that the favourites of the gods eat. Telemachus took his place in the handsome chariot, and Nestor's son, that leader of men, Pisistratus, got in behind him and took the reins in his hands, and flicked the horses with the whip to urge them forward. The willing pair flew off towards the plains, putting the high city of Pylos behind them, and all day long the yoke rose and fell on their necks. The sun went down, and all the ways grew dark. They reached Pherae, where they drove up to the house of Diocles, son of Autolycus, whose father was Alphaeus. There they spent the night and received the gifts that hospitality dictates. As soon as dawn appeared, fresh and rosy-fingered, they harnessed their horses once again and mounted the burnished chariot. Out past the echoing portico and through the gates they drove, a flick of the whip to speed them on, and the pair flew on with a will. They came to the wheat plains and hastened on to their journey's end with all the speed of their thoroughbred horses. The sun went down, and all the ways grew dark.